I think we are currently living in a society that is hyper-focused on performance. And I think we're paying a really high price for this. Focusing on performance is actually a really good thing, but how we do it is not. Please keep in mind that the following is just my personal opinion. These are my observations and my thoughts, and I'm not saying that this is the universal truth and that everyone has to see it like that. But I think as a society, we have become obsessed with tracking any variable that we think is a good measure for how well we are doing in school, in the workplace, in performance environments, and even in our private lives. And I see quite a few issues with that. We often assume that a variable matters for performance without any evidence or proof that it actually does. Many variables we focus on nowadays are not a good measure for performance. What is also problematic is that many variables that have shown to matter for performance are not even factored in. So the things that would actually be helpful to focus on because we know they improve performance are not given any attention. But I don't only see an issue with what we measure, but also how we do it and how we interpret the data that we get. From my perspective, this process is often really flawed. Let me give you some examples to show you what I mean. In schools, we measure performance with grades. Even though we know from research dating back to the 1970s that grades do not fulfill the 3 quality criteria of a good measure, there are huge problems with school grades in terms of their validity, reliability, and objectivity. Studies reveal that school grades are heavily influenced by factors that have nothing to do with an individual's performance. For example, the socioeconomic background of a student's parents. If you are in a high-performing or in a low-performing classroom, or if your teacher is in a good mood or in a bad mood while they are marking your test. But the biggest flaw I see with using grades as a measure for performance is that they are also used to predict the future potential of a human being. And they don't even measure the present potential accurately. And I think this is the most destructive consequence for all the participants in the educational system. For the students, for the parents, but also for the teachers. We know from studies that there's no correlation between your school grades, your grades at university, your success in the workplace, and your success in life, which means that school grades have absolutely no predictive power how well an individual will do in the future. However, and even though this is not explicitly said anywhere, I think that educational systems around the world make students, parents, and teachers believe in this premise that good grades mean future success. So if you have good grades at school, you will be successful in life. And this is simply not true. Based on the scientific evidence we have, we can clearly see that this is not true. But even without the evidence from the research, everyone who went to school kind of already knows that. And there's plenty of research out there that shows what actually matters for success. And there's even research that specifically looks at success of students in the educational setting. Professor Angela Duckworth and her research on grit and self-control give interesting insights in how important effort for your goals is. And unlike school grades, these 2 traits, grit and self-control, actually have predictive power, which means these 2 variables can predict how successful an individual will be in the future. Now, you can believe this or not, but if we look at high-performance domains and the research of how someone becomes an expert at a skill or a task, we can see a very similar pattern. Expert performance is the combination of passion and perseverance over time. Interestingly, despite all this evidence, in most educational systems, grades are still the only measure of performance. And the same is true for measuring performance in the workplace. A large number of jobs have turned into a simple numbers game. The higher your numbers are, the more you get praised and the more you get paid. It doesn't seem to matter if this comes at a cost to quality or if it motivates some individuals to engage in unethical behaviors to bump up their numbers. Because as long as the money keeps coming in, everyone is happy and no one asks any questions. At least that's how it often looks like from my perspective. And the variables that have shown to actually matter for performance in the workplace, like team spirit, mutual understanding of goals and how to achieve them, as well as listening to each other's needs and creating a work climate that is characterized by openness, honesty and reflection. I wonder how many companies measure performance of their employees like this. Probably not very many. And the same is true for performance environments like sports, music, entertainment, dance, and so on. High performers in these environments don't have it any better than the average person. They are stuck in the same system as everyone else, and they are paying an even higher price because in terms of measuring performance, these environments operate according to the motto, the more the merrier. The more performance data, the better. Quantity over quality. And looking at the research again, it is questionable that many variables we measure in performance domains are actually a good indicator of performance or performance improvement. And what is true for the educational sector and the workplace is also true for performance environments. There's no evidence that many of the variables we use to measure performance in this domain have any predictive power how well an individual will perform in the future. And just like in the two environments, school and workplace, we already have the answers. We know from the research what really matters for performance and long-term success. But again, this is often not being considered. Now, of course, this hyper-focus on measuring all kinds of performance variables is not all bad. I am not going to deny that it has been really helpful and resulted in a lot of advancements and improvements. But I think we have to be more careful what variables we use to measure performance, how we do it, and how we interpret the data we get. And the reason why we should be more careful is that the drive to measure performance variables and use them as evidence can have negative consequences for the participants in the system. In all three environments, school, workplace, and performance domains, I believe that this hyper-focus on questionable performance metrics has set the individuals up for failure. Now, I'm not saying that people don't need to be challenged and motivated to get better. And yes, it is very important to have performance data. But what I am saying is that I don't think it is helpful to do it in the way we currently do it. From my perspective as a performance consultant, especially when looking at the connection between performance and mental well-being, I have to say that the research over the last decade clearly shows that the way we think about performance and what we do because of our assumptions and beliefs that might not even be true has negatively affected us, especially in terms of our mental well-being. But more on that in another video.